Ghost Spirits of Christmas, Tessa Lamar Novels, Volume 2, written by Kathryn M. Hearst, narrated by Holly Adams. Chapter 31. Detective Burns. Aaron's frustration came through the phone. I glanced over my shoulder and leaned further into my cubicle. I needed walls and a door to have this conversation. Hi, it's Tessa. Listen, I was able to get a few images of the Reyes and Mercier cases. Maybe they're not related. Nothing matches.
What do you mean, nothing matches?
Partridge's and Black's killer had dark hair. Reyes's was blonde. Mercier knew her assailant, though I couldn't get a look at his face. I only saw a blurred profile. He had blonde hair, but I can't be sure it's the same guy. Aaron, that killing felt intimate. Not like the other two.
It was worth a shot. Thanks.
He sighed.
Hell of a coincidence.
Do you want me to come to the rink? I wanted to see him. The defeated tone in his voice pulled on my heartstrings.
No need. We have it all on video surveillance. The victim's family is flying in later today.
Come to dinner tonight at May's. It's Thanksgiving. He shouted at someone, then came back to the call.
Sorry, I don't think I'll be out of here in time. Make me a doggy bag?
Of course. Call me later, please.
I'll try.
He disconnected. The clock on the wall read 2 p.m. I'd left Bryson outside for 3 hours. I gathered my things and headed for the parking lot. Despite my concern for Aaron and frustration over my apparent bad reputation, the midday sun brought a smile to my face. I looked to the sky and soaked it in.
Tessa!
Michael Adams jogged across the parking lot.
Tessa?
What is he doing here? I turned to the SUV and sighed. I'd almost made it. With some effort, I smoothed my expression and walked toward him. Good afternoon. What brings you to the station?
I tried your cell and couldn't reach you, so I Googled you and, well, I spoke with your great-grandmother. She told me you were here.
My head spun. Anyone could poke around online and find my great-grandmother's home number. Did something happen?
Yes, Gavin is speaking to me through the radio.
Michael shifted his weight from one foot to the other. While I had personal experience with spirits, including Gavin, using electronics to make contact, I had serious doubts that Michael had received some sort of cosmic Morse code. Michael.
Before Gavin and I were dating, he was seeing someone else. Their song was At Last by Etta James.
He rolled his eyes.
Cliché, I know, but I've heard it 3 times today.
That happens sometimes, but
it doesn't happen when the radio isn't on or when I have it set to the rock station.
Michael flashed a triumphant smile. His pushiness gave me pause. People inserted themselves into investigations because they had something to hide. In Michael's case, I wondered if it had something to do with his husband's cheating. I see. But why would he play his song with a former lover? Michael's hands curled into fists.
I think Terrence is the murderer.
I didn't want to encourage him, but at the same time, the police had no leads on the case. What does Terrence look like? Michael shrugged.
Blonde, brown eyes, short, nothing to write home about. I never understood what Gavin saw in him.
I knew better than to discuss details with the victim's family, but I didn't know how else to explain that Michael had misread the signs. Plus, I worried he might try to take justice into his own hands, if he hadn't already. In my visions, I saw the killer as dark-haired.
I'm telling you, Terrence had something to do with it.
I remembered the photocopy of the artist's sketch in my purse. I unfolded the paper and handed it to him. This is the man I saw.
He doesn't look familiar.
Michael's hopeful expression morphed into a glare.
Detective Burns told me they had some evidence that Gavin might have been unfaithful. Did that come from you?
I sighed and lowered my eyes. Yes.
I don't know what you think you saw, but it's complete rubbish.
I'm sorry, Michael.
You said the visions could be wrong.
I caught movement out of the corner of my eye and turned. Bryson waved as he walked toward us. I looked back to Michael. No, the visions are always right. I said what the deceased say is sometimes jumbled and confused. I'm certain the killer had dark hair. Bryson set his hand on my lower back and nodded to Michael.
I was beginning to worry.
I had a lot of evidence to get through. I looked back to Michael to find him openly gaping at Bryson.
I'm Michael Adams, Bryson declared.
I said, the detectives are working on the case. I'll let you know if I hear anything. Please try to be patient. He looked at me as if he hadn't heard what I said, then took another long look at Bryson and nodded.
Thanks. Sorry about calling your family. I thought I'd found something.
I forced a smile. I understand. Michael turned and walked back the way he'd come. Bryson whispered,
What was that about?
His husband was the victim found hanging in the tree. He's grieving and overstepped his boundaries. I took his hand to steady my nerves. The entire conversation had left me shaken.
Has he done something like this before?
He narrowed his eyes in the direction Michael had gone. No, but he found May's phone number and called the house. Bryson pulled me against his side and guided me to the SUV.
Tell Aaron about this and don't go near him again.
Thank you.
Ready to go?
The weight of the day settled on my shoulders. Yes, but we don't need to go to the ice rink. They have it on video. Plus, I saw enough from reading the evidence. I don't think the murders are related. There are at least 2 different killers. He ran his hand over his jaw.
I'm surprised. That they fit into the song seems too much of a coincidence.
I agree, but unless the guy is a skinwalker, it's not a serial killer.
I have an idea.
He held my car door open. I climbed in and buckled my seatbelt. Where are we going? He winked and started the SUV.
You must be hungry, and I've been thinking about Sheila's riddle. What do you say we go grab some food and talk to Scarlett?
The seer? We'd visited the elderly woman when the second sight came on me out of the blue. She's not Nunnehi or a shifter.
She's been around a long time. She can help us understand what the old ones are saying.
You're an old one and you don't know. I couldn't help but poke fun. Thanks to the Nunnehi blood in his veins, Bryson might have looked 30-something, but he was over 100 years old.
Funny girl.
He merged into traffic and relaxed.
How did the readings go? Any trouble with the firebird?
I debated the merits of telling him about Zach and the rumors about my loose morals. I read quite a few objects in a short amount of time. I did okay, until I caught some gruesomeness off a picture frame. The vision almost pulled me in, but I fought it.
That's progress, Tessa.
He took my hand.
Did something else happen?
The cop working the evidence room flat out asked me if I was sleeping with you and Aaron. I was mortified.
First, it's no one's business. Second, why do you care what other people think?
I stared at him dumbfounded. I'd expected him to come to my defense, maybe laugh it off. Instead, he twisted it around to make it my fault? You don't understand. It's hard enough being a woman in a male-dominated field, add in a bad reputation, and no one will ever take me seriously. He seemed to mull it over, but shrugged.
They'll take you seriously for the work you do. The water cooler talk is nothing but rumors and wishful thinking.
Easy for you to say. Guys are heroes if they sleep with a lot of women. Bryson's grin faded.
You don't think Aaron is catching shit about the news coverage?
I haven't heard anything. He gave me a hard look.
Do you think they'd gossip with you about him?
Why hasn't he mentioned this to me?
I don't think he cares about the rumors.
He turned into the diner. Why can't people mind their own business? Bryson cut the engine and gave me a "did you really just say that" look. I thought about what he'd said. Would it bother me if the two men in my life were into each other? Hell yes, it would bother me. Not because I had a problem with them loving each other, but because I didn't know where that left me. I'd be the odd vagina out. Chapter 32. A table full of teenagers laughed from a corner booth. Otherwise, I had my choice of tables in the diner. I'd slammed the door and marched inside to get a break from Bryson's lectures. He lingered outside on his cell phone, probably talking to Aaron. The two seemed to enjoy giving each other daily Tessa reports. I spotted Scarlett behind the counter and waved. "Hey, Tessa. Good to see you again." She looked from me to Bryson pacing outside. "Grab a seat. Want some coffee?" "Yes, ma'am. That would be nice." I slid into the booth and thumbed through the menu. Despite my rumbling stomach, I decided to stick with coffee. May expected us for dinner in a couple of hours, and she'd smell restaurant food on me a mile away. Scarlett brought a coffee pot and 2 mugs to the table. "You here for food or reading?" "A reading." I waited until she filled both cups, then added enough cream and sugar to turn the black liquid beige. She set the pot aside and joined me. "Man trouble?" I glanced at Bryson and nodded. "Yes, always. But that's not why I'm here." Scarlett set her hand on top of mine, and her gentle magic seeped into my bones. Her eyes closed, leaving a serene expression on her weathered face. The calm didn't last long. The elderly woman burst into a fit of giggles befitting the teens across the restaurant. "Oh, to be young again. Dear girl, your great-grandmother is right. You make it too easy for them." I leaned closer and lowered my voice. "If I made it too easy, then I'd be having sex. They say I make it too hard." She giggled. "Honey, trust me when I say you do make it hard. Both of them." I furrowed my brow as I mulled over her words. I opened my mouth to speak and caught the wicked glint in her eye. "Oh, my goodness." She erupted in another round of laughter. I waited until she composed herself. "Do you have time to talk?" "Yes, of course." She tilted her head. "It's not that you're too difficult, is it?" "No." "Your firebird is in the way. You know they call redheads fire crotch. But in your case, it's no joke, is it?" She took one look at my face and roared in laughter all over again. I wanted to turn around and leave.
What's so funny?
Bryson gave Scarlett a half hug, careful not to make skin-to-skin contact with the seer. My cheeks blazed redder than the checkered tablecloths. "None of your business. Just girl talk." Scarlett motioned for him to sit. Bryson slid into the booth.
Tessa had a visit from her Nunnehi mother's spirit.
I know. Hush, you." Scarlett took his hand without asking. Bryson looked as if he might pull away. He watched her with wary eyes, making me wonder what secrets he might be hiding. She met Bryson's gaze. The laughter had left her expression, leaving her eyes dark and unyielding. "Have you not heard the saying, 'A divided house will fall'?"
"I have."
"Yet you didn't heed the warning, did you?" Bryson lowered his chin. "What's done is done." Scarlett turned her attention to me. The spells you cast, the words. Do you take them literally? The words are usually simple, but they also contain symbolism. I'd never thought about the construction of a spell as two separate components. Should I take her words literally? She smiled. What does a bird crave more than anything? To fly? She nodded. What does fire crave? I considered her question, unsure of the answer. Oxygen? Material to burn. Scarlett bobbed her head. More or less. Think of a wildfire, how it spreads and ravages. It cleanses and destroys. I can't go around burning things. Is this the symbolism? It hit me when I met her eyes. It wants out, and I've been keeping it tightly locked down. She pointed at me and looked at Bryson. This one is smart. You underestimate her. My chest swelled with pride. I was smart and had good instincts with everything, except magic and men. Maybe I needed to trust myself and my abilities. Thank you. I'm not done with you. She shook her head. It isn't your emotions that are causing the problem with the firebird. It's your dual nature. My what? Whatever pride I'd felt vanished. Bryson took my hand.
Your fear prevents you from being who you are meant to be.
Scarlett smacked his arm. No, don't put that on the girl. We all fear. Without it, we'd behave like toddler daredevils with no thought to the consequences. She turned to me. Child, you must learn to give without expectations and take without guilt. The conversation left me more confused than before we sat down. I don't understand. Scarlett turned to Bryson. We need a few minutes alone. He hesitated, but stood and took his coffee to the far side of the restaurant. She took my hands, but this time I didn't feel her magic. You've had a rough start. There's a little girl inside you who's terrified to be alone, yet pushes people away. The woman she became worries herself to death that others will see her the way she sees herself. You must learn to accept yourself and believe you deserve to be loved. Let go of the past and stop worrying about the future. Words of denial hung on the tip of my tongue, but I bowed my head as my throat tightened. She barely knew me, and she'd call me on my crap. Years of study to understand what made people tick, and I failed to apply any of the knowledge to my life. No, stop that right now. Scarlett patted my hand. Listen to me. I met her gaze and nodded. These are hard lessons. Most of us have a lifetime to learn them. You'll get there, but you'll have to make a choice soon. You'll embrace your magic, or you'll give it away. I can do that? Give it up and have my normal life back? A kernel of hope formed in my heart. If that is what you want, yes. She leaned back. I have to get back to work before I get fired. Sure you don't want something to eat? Eat? I couldn't imagine putting food in my mouth. So many thoughts rolled around in my head, I felt seasick. No, thank you. We're expected for dinner soon. Scarlett stood and motioned to Bryson. Go easy on him. He has his own lessons to learn. I turned toward him and really looked for the first time in a while. He sat hunched over his coffee. Shadows rimmed his eyes and accentuated the hard lines of his face. Scarlett, will Bryson and I end up together?
Aren't you together now?
I guess, but
She shrugged. I'm better at seeing the past than the future, but I've known Bryson a long time. He loves you deeply, but he's holding back. Maybe he's as afraid as you are to let down his walls.
Chapter 33. I contemplated the man sitting next to me the entire drive home. From the way his jaw muscles bulged, I imagine he did the same with me. Bryson's phone chirped for the 15th time in half as many minutes. His ability to ignore incoming calls and messages drove me nuts. Want me to answer it? I smiled as sweetly as possible given my current mood.
No.
He took my hand.
About this morning. I understand why you question my feelings for you, but you have to know I love you.
Bryson,
please, let me finish. I've thought about this. When we're spending time together, it's just us. No magic, no elders. The times we're watching television or cleaning the kitchen are the best parts of my day. I'd feel the same way about you if you were human.
Really? My heart did a backflip and landed in my stomach. He'd said similar things in the past, but this time, they took hold.
I'm crazy about you.
I wiped my eyes. Scarlett said something to me that made a lot of sense. I'm afraid of being left on some doorstep, so I push people away. I don't want to push you away. He squeezed my hand.
Good, because I'm not going anywhere.
Do you want to talk about the other thing she said? I knew I poked the skunk, but I wanted everything out in the open between us. Bryson's phone rang again. He frowned.
She's as bad as a Gila speaking in riddles.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. I'm stressed. Tribal members have been calling, asking when we'll reopen.
Oh, that has to be hard. My mind wandered back to what Scarlett had said about Bryson and Aaron, and a wicked thought crossed my mind. I could help relieve some of your stress.
How's that?
I turned to face him and ran my hand up his thigh. He glanced at me and sighed.
We're running late.
I considered the console between the front seats. If I put my seat back all the way, I could lean across and miss most of the dials and knobs on the control panel. I pushed my insecurities down and gathered my courage as I slid my hand over his crotch. You drive. I'll take care of you.
Tessa.
He gripped the wheel tighter.
We're almost there.
Turn around and circle the block a couple of times. I opened the buttons on his fly, one by one. I want to do this for you. He drew a sharp breath when I slipped my hand into his jeans.
Let me pull over before you get us both killed.
I leaned across the console and kissed his neck as he maneuvered the Rover onto the shoulder. Another mile and I'd have missed my chance. I could see the edge of my family's property from where he stopped. He turned to kiss me, but I backed away. No kissing. It gets me going, and we don't want that.
Are you sure about this? I like this vehicle. You won't scorch the leather.
He eased his seat back as he spoke. Don't touch any of my pink parts, and we should be fine. With something akin to an advanced yoga pose, I used the console to brace myself and managed to get my head into his lap. He might have worried about his upholstery, but his body didn't care. I wrapped my hand around his length and lowered my head. Bryson exhaled and lifted his hips, meeting me in the middle. It had always amazed me how men could simultaneously relax into sex and tense up. I'd done it. I'd taken what I wanted, given without expecting anything in return. Better still, I hoped I'd chipped away some of his walls. My eyes closed as I focused on making him feel good. The clank of something metal knocking against the window stilled everything except my heart. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't as if I made a practice of giving blowjobs in a car on the side of the road. The beam of a flashlight illuminated the driver's seat as Bryson fumbled to move me enough to close his britches and lower the window.
Damn, sorry. I saw you on the side of the road and thought you'd broken down.
Aaron's voice filled the car.
I cut out early to join you two for Thanksgiving dinner.
I glanced up, but couldn't see his face behind the bright light. I wanted to die right there, keel over and never have to face either one of them. My eyes low, I eased back into my seat.
Light.
Bryson shielded his eyes.
Sorry, man.
Aaron cut the flashlight.
I'll see you guys at May's.
I waited until he walked toward his car before I moved. The stunned look on Bryson's face made me giggle. Not in a cute way. Full-on maniacal laughter spilled out of me until tears leaked from the corners of my eyes.
It's not funny.
I nodded, still unable to control myself. He cracked a smile and shook his head.
We, you and me, can't catch a break.
I turned to make sure Aaron had pulled away. Let's try again.
No, we're already late.
Who cares? What's 5 more minutes going to hurt? I leaned over and ran my hand down his chest. He cupped my cheek and brushed his lips across mine. The sweet kiss grew more passionate when I dipped my hand lower. His hands tangled in my hair as he broke the kiss and urged my head down. I'd just hit my stride when a car horn honked.
Damn it!
Bryson growled and lowered the window. His hand remained on the back of my head, signaling me to stay put.
Hey, Darlene.
You broke down or something? Need a ride? Her saccharine voice grated my nerves.
I'm good. Stopped to make a call.
He turned the motor over.
See you at May's.
See you then, sweet buns. The sound of tires on gravel told me that she'd pulled away. I scrambled back into my seat. Whatever humor I'd found in the situation had gone. Honestly, that woman! He steered the SUV onto the road and headed for May's.
She is who she is.
I frowned. Do you think we're cursed? Maybe someone put a chastity spell on us?
I think it's the universe's way of telling us to wait.
Oh, no. Don't you dare start that again. I know one blowjob isn't going to fix everything that's wrong between us. I'm not stupid. He parked between Aaron and Darlene's cars.
We'll talk about this later.
Damn it, Bryson. I want to talk about it now. I swear on everything good and holy, if you tell me this'll work out in time, I'll deck you. Tessa Lamar, where did you come from? Darlene stood on the porch with her hands on her hips. I know I didn't see you in that vehicle before.
We need to get inside.
Bryson opened his door and stepped out. I hung my head and counted to 10. The real problem with our relationship was that we never had 5 minutes alone. We couldn't finish a conversation, let alone get comfortable with each other, when someone always interrupted us. It wasn't healthy. What's the matter, Tessa? Got caught with your hand in the cookie jar? Darlene smirked. Actually, Mama, I got caught with his penis in my mouth. Twice. I marched to the porch. May, Dottie, Bryson, Aaron, and Stone all stared, slack-jawed. Chapter 34. I stiffened my spine and my upper lip and walked past my gawking family. May and Dottie had set the table, and steaming piles of food, along with a gorgeous turkey, waited for someone to dig in. I had my own steaming pile of something to dig into, but I'd be damned if I broke the silence. I poured myself and Bryson a glass of tea and carried them to the table as everyone took their seats. The tension in the room threatened to suffocate me as I sank into the chair between Bryson and Aaron. "Tessa, you might want to go wash up and brush your teeth before you get too comfortable." Darlene nodded toward the hall. May's voice rose to just shy of a shout. "I'm not going to have my dinner go to waste because Tessa Marie got a little nookie in the car." She shook her head. "We're all adults at this table, and I assume we've all had our share of sex in cars." Bryson drew a breath and took my hand under the table. "Did they have cars when Grandpa was courting you?" Darlene giggled. "Besides, Tessa wasn't having sex. She was given a pre-dinner blowjob." The firebird flared, along with my temper. I'd had enough. I pulled my hand from Bryson's and slammed it on the table. "I guess the apple didn't fall far from the slut tree, did it, Mama?" Dottie gasped, and Aaron bowed his head. I'd overstepped, and I knew it. May cleared her throat, stood and went to the Tupperware cabinet. She pulled out enough containers to store the food and set them on the table. "I've had enough of this business between the two of you. Everyone fill a bowl and get the hell out of my house before I break out the switch and tan all your hides. You have 10 minutes. I sat stunned as May and Dottie left the room. Part of me wanted to run after them and apologize, but I knew better than to chase a ticked-off badger into its den. Instead, I glanced between Aaron and Bryson and sighed. Darlene shot me dirty looks as she filled bowls with more than her and Stone's fair share of dinner. I did my best to ignore her as I made plates for May and Dottie and set them on the counter. The men put the remainder of the food into containers and cleared the serving dishes from the table. They exchanged a look now and then, but didn't seem as upset as the women in the house. Stone washed, Aaron rinsed, and Bryson dried the serving bowls. I put the clean plates and silverware in the cabinet and whispered to Bryson, "I'm sorry."
"Not now."
He ran his finger over the back of my hand. Aaron flashed me a quick grin over his shoulder. Of course, Darlene sat her butt in her chair and didn't lift a finger to help out. I wanted to snatch her by the hair and drag her outside, but May would make good on her promise to get a switch if I dared. Bryson, Aaron, and I walked up the path to Charlie's house. I'd done it. I'd ruined Thanksgiving dinner. I'd let Darlene bait me into an argument at May's table, a mortal sin as far as my great-grandmother was concerned.
"We should eat while it's still warm."
Bryson put the containers on the table and went into the kitchen for silverware. My stomach rumbled in response. I hadn't seen food since breakfast. Plus, a full mouth would decrease my chances of saying something awful. "I'll get the plates." Aaron sat and folded his hands in his lap.
"Should we talk about this?"
"Which part?" The last thing I wanted to do was talk about it. Aaron glanced between us.
"All of it."
Bryson took a seat.
"We were careless. It won't happen again."
I'm not comfortable discussing my sex life with anyone except the other party directly involved in said sex life. I smiled at Aaron to ease the tension. "No offense." He held up his hands.
"None taken. We don't need to discuss what happened earlier, but we do need to decide how we're going to proceed from here."
Bryson opened the containers and filled his plate.
"Tessa, I know you don't want another lecture, so why don't you go first?
I shook my head. Nope. No way. I wouldn't allow them to suck me into this conversation. I thought we settled things on the drive?
Yes, but there's another person to consider,
Bryson said.
Tessa.
Aaron sighed.
Have a seat. Let's talk this through.
I sank into a chair and folded my arms. After the blow-up with Darlene, I needed comfort, not to plan my future or debate the benefits of a three-way. Aaron rubbed his hands together.
So, how does this work? I have, 10% of your soul, so I get 10% of her time?
You'd be happy with that? I grumbled.
Once I found out you two were different than me, I figured that was it. I'm happy to have a shot.
Aaron squeezed my hand.
I'd like the chance to get to know you better.
That didn't sound bad. It didn't come close to what I'd expected. I'm okay with that.
Same here.
Bryson set his elbows on the table and leaned in.
With both of you.
I tried to maintain my poker face and failed. My brain spun like a ride at the fair, bringing questions, doubts, and fears to the surface. What's the end game here? Am I supposed to choose between you? Bryson said,
There's no end game. We can take it one day at a time.
I nodded. Okay, I guess. Aaron nudged me.
Relax your shoulders and say that again.
I don't know the rules. This is different than dating humans. I'd suffered enough humiliation for one day. I couldn't tell them I was afraid they'd pair off and leave me. How would we explain this kind of relationship to the world? Bryson brushed his fingers across my cheek.
You're right. It's an unusual situation, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. We should take a break, eat dinner. Maybe a few beers would help loosen us up.
Aaron looked at Bryson. They shared some unspoken language and came to a decision without a glance my way. Sounds great. I smiled and put my napkin in my lap. I couldn't stop scrolling through my growing list of concerns and worst-case scenarios.
Tessa?
Aaron held a container of turkey out to me. By the look on his face, I assumed he'd waited for me to take it for a while.
Are you sure you're okay?
I'm all right. They shared a meaningful look. I wanted to scream. Relationships involved actual communication, not some bizarre code using eyebrows and dimples. Bryson tilted his head and studied me. Aaron's phone rang, breaking the tension. He stood and took the call in the kitchen. Bryson and I sat in silence until he returned.
That was Samuel's. I have to go to the station.
Aaron split a roll in half and stuffed it with a piece of turkey.
The facial recognition analysis of the surveillance video from the rink is in.
I'll save you a plate. I smiled as he leaned in and kissed my cheek.
Thanks. You two have fun. Don't do anything I wouldn't. Yeah, never mind.
He chuckled as he gave Bryson a half-hug backslap.
Be safe, brother.
Bryson turned back to his plate and sighed. After Aaron had left, I propped my chin in my hand. Not much of a Thanksgiving.
I have a lot to be thankful for.
He smiled and took a bite of turkey. I didn't feel particularly thankful. In fact, I wished I had a rewind button. I'd go back a year and a day and spend the holiday with Charlie. Back then, my biggest problem was my jerk of a boss. I didn't know anything about magic or shifters, and Nunnehi lived in old Cherokee fairy tales. The obvious answer to my problems hung over my head like an executioner's blade. In a way, it meant the death of a part of me, a part that had caused me nothing but grief. I couldn't go back in time, but I could be human again. Chapter 35. I woke in my new bedroom with the dog sleeping across my legs. I glanced at the clock and wiggled myself free. Bryson stood at the stove cooking French toast.
Good morning. How'd you sleep?
Like a rock, but I'm late. It's Black Friday. I have to take May and Dottie shopping. I poured myself a cup of coffee.
Your phone rang about 5 minutes ago. I planned to wake you for breakfast.
Thanks. I wandered into the bathroom while listening to the first message.
Hi, Tessa. This is Michael Adams. Remember I told you about Gavin's ex? I ran into him last night. I know what you said you saw, but I'm telling you, something isn't right. Call me, please.
I sighed and hit save. The next message was from Aaron.
Morning, beautiful. Sorry I had to run out last night. They arrested Michael Adams on a drunken disorderly. I know you said you couldn't find a connection between the murders, but the guy who killed Callan looks a lot like the sketch.
I didn't have time to deal with this. May would disown me if I didn't take her to the Black Friday sale soon. I set the phone on the counter while I brushed my teeth and washed my face. Maddie pushed her way into the bathroom, growling at the full-length mirror. Down, Maddie, bad dog. Her growls turned into a full-blown barking fit. The feeling of someone watching caused the hairs on the back of my neck to rise. I turned and met Gavin Partridge's eyes in the mirror. In Bermuda shorts and a linen button-down, he looked like any other middle-aged Floridian male, except for the strand of lights wrapped around his neck and the horrified look on his swollen, blue-tinged face.
You must find Terry before it's too late for the swans. Save my swans.
My mouth moved, but nothing came out. I'd seen my fair share of spirits, but never one so gruesome. Most appeared to me as they had looked in life.
My true love gave to me 6 geese a-laying, 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves.
He faded from view. Bryson! This isn't right. Oh my God, this can't be happening. I tripped over the dog in my haste to get out of the bathroom. He was here. I need you. Bryson came around the corner and wrapped his arms around me.
It's okay. Relax. Who was here?
Although I thought Gavin had gone, the dog continued to bark at the mirror.
Maddie, down!
Bryson's voice cut through the noise and sent the dog running for the kitchen. It's not her fault. She was barking at Gavin Partridge, his ghost. I buried my face in his chest. He looked like he did when he was hanging in the tree. There are going to be more murders. I need to call Aaron.
Slow down. Tell me what he said.
I repeated the ghost's words while Bryson held me. His gentle caresses siphoned the edge off my hysteria until I stopped trembling.
I'll call Aaron. Try to eat something.
Thanks. I took one look at the food and pushed the plate away. The blueberry syrup reminded me of the ghost's face. I opened a browser on my phone and searched the words geese, murder, deaths, Central Florida. Nothing came up. From Bryson's half of the conversation, it sounded like Aaron took the situation seriously. I scratched Maddie's head as I searched the name Gavin Partridge. The screen filled with articles about the upcoming Christmas extravaganza. Gavin had submitted the bid to the event organizers last year. As a result of the win, the Convention and Visitors Bureau promoted him to an upper management position. On a whim, I added Terrence to the search menu. One article mentioned a Terrence Pierce in conjunction with Las Vegas's bid to host the festivities. I cut and pasted the information into my notes app and refilled my mug. If the morning were any indication, I'd need a lot more caffeine to make it through the day. Bryson returned and frowned at my untouched plate.
Aaron's going to question Michael Adams. Keep your phone handy in case he needs to reach you.
Thanks for calling him. I used my mug to warm my hands. I think this has something to do with the Christmas extravaganza. He sat beside me.
Okay.
Gavin was the one who sent in the bid. It was his project.
What do you know about the event?
Not much. I sighed. Gavin said to save his swans, but mentioned the geese with the other days in the song, the days with murders. I can't find anything online about murders related to geese.
Use my computer to dig up information on the Christmas extravaganza. I'll take May shopping.
My heart warmed a few degrees. He drove me up the wall 90% of the time, but the other 10, Bryson was a peach. You don't know what you're volunteering for. It's ugly out there.
I think I can handle Christmas shoppers.
It's not the shoppers I'm worried about. Have you ever had to restrain an 87-year-old woman after she clotheslined another shopper? Bryson ran his hand over the back of his neck. I smiled, knowing he'd rethought his decision. It's okay. I'll take May and Dottie. You stay here and do some research.
Your car is still in the parking lot.
I can drive Charlie's truck. It's okay. It'll do me good to get out of the house.
Afraid of seeing another ghost?
He grinned. Heck yes. I don't mind the ones that look like regular people, but that was something entirely different. The memory of Gavin's ghost would likely plague me for the rest of my life.
Did he feel malevolent? We could do a cleansing spell.
No, I don't think so. More desperate than anything. Desperate people do bad things. Maybe desperate ghosts do too? He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and kissed my temple.
Let's stay in tonight. Order a pizza and watch a movie. Just the two of us. No phones, no ghosts.
Sounds perfect, but I need to get next door before May sends out a search party. I kissed his cheek and went to my room to get dressed. I'd tell him about my decision to release my magic after dinner. It would ruin our evening, but I hated secrets. If he still loved me as a human, we'd have plenty of nights on the couch watching movies. See you this afternoon. I waved to Bryson on my way to May's. I hoped that shopping would provide the opportunity to apologize and move past my ruining Thanksgiving. I walked through the front door into a dark kitchen. Grandmay? Dottie? My stomach sank. The house was empty. I pulled a note from the fridge and sighed. They'd changed their plans and gone shopping with a lady from church. Chapter 36. I came through the front door and dropped my purse on the floor. I hadn't upset May like this since high school when she caught me sneaking out to meet a boy. As horrible as that was, it didn't compare to the shame I felt now. Bryson took one look at me and stood.
What's wrong?
They're not home. May and Dottie went shopping without me. He embraced me, remaining quiet until I relaxed in his arms.
May was pretty upset yesterday. Give her some time.
She's never been this mad. Not at me. He kissed my forehead.
Why don't you do the research, and I'll get started on the Christmas lights. That'll soften her up.
I guess. What choice did I have? Pouting and worrying over it wouldn't help. I refilled my coffee cup and sat at the table.
I'll be outside if you have any unexpected visitors.
He and the dog headed for the door. I smiled and waved him off. Have fun! The pressure to put on a brave face left as soon as Bryson went out the door. Rather than dig in right away, I decided to take a shower to clear my head. I stood under the water, staring at the wall while taking stock of my life. I believed the situation with May would sort itself out after I ate a dozen crows and apologized to Darlene. For once, I didn't grieve for Charlie. Instead, I mourned the loss of the gifts he'd left me. I couldn't help but feel I would let him down if I gave up my magic. Enough of the pity party. I have research to do.
Yes, you do, young lady.
A male voice spoke from the other side of the curtain. At first, I assumed that Bryson had returned, but it occurred to me that the person had a southern drawl. Plus, Bryson's tone registered a couple of octaves lower than whoever spoke. I peeked out of the shower curtain, and my blood turned to a cherry slushy.
Chop, chop, Miss Lamar. We're here to help you.
Gavin Partridge, in his hangman glory, stood beside the sink. We? I clung to the plastic barrier, both for modesty and safety. Gavin rolled his bulging eyes.
The other spirits. We're all here to help you stop Terrence.
Could I have a moment, please?
Psh, I've seen it all before. Besides, I prefer outies to innies.
I snatched the towel from the rod and wrapped it around myself. I hadn't finished my shower, but he showed no signs of leaving. I assume you had better manners before you died? He laughed and blurred out of sight. I hurried into my room and threw on jeans and a t-shirt, then pulled my hair into a ponytail. It'd be impossible to tame if it dried without putting some effort into it, but I had spirits waiting. On a typical day, the waiting room for the medicine shop contained a handful of people to see Bryson or me. This was no ordinary day. Ghosts crammed into every available square inch, some overlapping or floating above others. Dear Lord in heaven, I grasped the door jamb for support. How many are here? Gavin smiled, or at least I thought he meant it as a smile.
12. The youngest McNamara survived.
McNamara? I glanced over the crowd, noting the 3 children.
6 geese a laying.
Gavin gave me an impatient look and threw his hands up. I don't understand. Where do the geese come in? His swollen face darkened.
The McNamara family ran Gooseberry Farms, one of only 2 turkey farms in the state. They were to supply the birds for the extravaganza dinner.
Oh, I had questions, but my head felt as crowded as the room and just as foggy. An older woman I recognized from the photos of the 3rd death scene stepped forward. Her form hadn't solidified as much as Gavin's, but the bullet hole in her head was unmistakable.
Gavin, go easy on the poor dear. She's in shock.
He put his hands on his hips and tapped his foot.
I assume there's a computer here. Do you have internet access?
I sighed. Yes, we have Wi-Fi.
I wasn't sure, given this house. I mean, it's rustic meets the 70s.
He smirked and motioned to me to get on with it. I hated Gavin Partridge. Sure, someone hit him on the head and hung him from a tree, but that didn't give him the right to be rude. Bryson's laptop still sat on the table. I went into the kitchen and sat.
Terrence Pierce.
Gavin leaned over my shoulder. Space, please. I leaned forward. He didn't have warmth or breath, but it bugged me to have him so close. I typed in the name and the same websites populated the page. Do you have his address or phone number?
In my contacts.
Gavin glared at the picture on the screen.
That's him.
This isn't the man I saw hurt you. But it was the man Gavin had sex with before someone else killed him.
It has to be. He's in Orlando now. Who else would do such a thing?
Gavin sputtered. Is Simon Reyes here? I raised my voice, hoping the ghost would hear me. A mist, resembling the shape of a human, moved into the kitchen like smoke exhaled from a pipe.
He's not going to be much help.
Gavin shook his head. I turned the computer toward Mr. Reyes's ghost. Is this the man who shot you? The mist didn't respond. I closed my eyes and focused on his energy, but sadness, unlike anything I'd experienced, surrounded me. His longing for his wife left me breathless.
Adele!
Gavin called as if directing a play. A lithe female spirit appeared, dressed in a long white gown. She was pretty and lithe, but the ethereal beauty standing before me belonged in a painting. Miss Mercier, did you know your killer? I whispered. The peace in her eyes made it feel like a sin to speak in her presence. I knew Terry from my time in Vegas. I considered him a friend. Miss Mercier's hair shifted, revealing the ugly wound on her forehead. I'm so sorry. Her words confirmed my vision, yet they took the breath from my lungs. I couldn't imagine the horror of a friend holding a gun to my head with the intention of ending my life. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and turned to Gavin. Do you know why he's doing this? Gavin puffed out his chest.
We were lovers before he took a job in Vegas. When I refused to come along, he broke things off. It got ugly, as these things often do. I stole the Christmas extravaganza from him.
All of these people were involved in the event? I glanced into the other room at the ghost children. I wanted to call him out on his lie. Terrence was his current lover, but I didn't want to embarrass him.
Yes. You need to focus. The swans are next.
As his temper flared, his neck strained against the Christmas lights. Do you have any idea who the next victim will be? I'd have never thought that the turkey farmers would land a spot on the hit list of a jilted lover. I didn't want to venture a guess about swans. Miss Mercier rested her hand on Gavin's shoulder. The Orlando Ballet are doing excerpts from Swan Lake at the Christmas ball. They are the obvious choice. I considered each of the murders. Some of the victims had a clear association with the lyrics of the song, while others didn't. He does seem to go for obvious when he can.
Shouldn't you call someone? That big guy outside, what about him? How about the cop? Shouldn't you call the detective?
Gavin fired off questions so fast I needed to duck and weave to avoid the bombardment. Please, give me a minute. Chapter 37. I walked outside for fresh air and to call Aaron without the spectral audience. Gavin's attitude plucked a rhythm on my last nerve. While I understood his need to save the people he'd hired for the Christmas extravaganza, his personality made me want to strangle him all over again. Aaron answered on the second ring.
Hey, Tessa, what's up?
I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, but the words left me. I have a house full of ghosts. Bryson must have heard what I said, because he climbed down from the ladder and listened in. It sounded like Aaron choked on his coffee.
I think I have a bad connection. Can you repeat that?
Gavin, Partridge, and the other murder victims are here. They've identified the shooter in the Mercier case and the motive for all 6. Gavin believes there will be more killings.
Does the shooter have a name?
Terrence Pierce. He's in town. He's Partridge's former lover and business competitor. All of the victims were involved in the Christmas extravaganza. I sat on the porch swing and closed my eyes. Aaron sighed.
We've identified 2 shooters. Plus, this guy is a pro.
6 geese-a-laying were the McNamara family. The youngest child survived the attack and is in the hospital. They're turkey farmers at Gooseberry Farms. I sent up a silent prayer he'd listen, despite the unusual witnesses.
I'll look into it. So, Did the ghosts tell you who's next?
The cast of Swan Lake from the Orlando Ballet. Aaron tapped hard enough for the sound to come through the line.
Son of a bitch. I found the McNamara case. Out of jurisdiction.
Can you get someone to take you serious enough to send people to the ballet?
I'll see what I can do.
Thanks, Aaron. I need to go. I disconnected and turned to Bryson. How much of that did you hear?
Most, if not all.
He motioned to the front door.
Are they still in there?
As far as I know. I planted my feet and set my elbows on my thighs. I can't do this anymore. He knelt and took my face in his hands.
Do what, babe?
Talk to spirits, magic, the spirit animal, all of it. I never asked for any of this.
It's still new to you. You'll get used to it.
I pulled away. In time, I know. But right now, I have a living room full of ghosts, including 3 children with bullet holes in their heads.
Magic is like bad relations. You need boundaries.
I snickered. Sit with me a minute before I have to go back in there.
I'm not joking. Do you remember the spell we used to send the conjurer away?
Yes? He reached for me.
Let's go clean house.
I took his hand and he opened the door. The spirits stilled when we entered, as if they knew what we planned. He gave my hand a squeeze, and we recited the spell. Someone has to move. You have to go.
You will go in the dark. You will hide in the day.
I send you away, back to where you were, through paths not walked,
with eyes not seeing. I send you away, as it is said.
It will be. Gavin rushed toward me.
No, Tessa, you can't do this. You need my help.
The terrified look in his eyes made me pause. I glanced at Bryson, but he either ignored or didn't see the ghosts surrounding us. He started the second incantation without me. I tugged his arm. Can we keep one? Gavin clasped his hands.
Please, please keep one.
The look Bryson gave said he thought I'd lost my mind.
Why?
I shrugged. Keeping Gavin close might come in handy.
I will definitely come in handy. I'll be as quiet as a dead church mouse. I swear it,
Gavin added.
You can call them to you by name when needed.
Bryson leaned close.
I'm not living in a house full of spirits.
Gavin rolled his eyes.
Oh, please. I've already seen everything there is to see with the both of you, including that pitiful scene in the car.
I'd heard enough. Bad enough that my family knew what we'd done in the car, but a dead stranger had no business peeping on our private moments. Let's do this.
Tessa, please. I'm joking.
Bryson and I chanted this spell 2 more times before the last of the spirits left the house. I took my time searching for any stragglers with my second sight. Over the previous months, I'd cast more spells than I could count. I'd always assumed my magic came from the firebird. Yet, she hadn't stirred when we forced the spirits to leave. He looked at me with a hopeful expression.
Are they gone?
Yep. The stress of the day caught up with me, and I plopped into a chair. Do you tap into your spirit animal when working magic?
It all comes from the same source. I feel it in my chest.
We did the spell, but the firebird didn't rise.
I felt your energy working with mine.
He sat on the edge of the sofa.
We should shift and spend some time in the sky.
My eyes drifted closed before I blinked them open. I'm exhausted. I need a catnap. The house phone rang, and Bryson went to the kitchen to answer. I tried to listen to his half of the conversation, but I couldn't follow the words. I felt as if I hadn't slept in days. Bryson stormed into the bedroom and returned with Charlie's shotgun in his hands.
Go in the back, now.
The unmistakable click-click of a shotgun woke me from my daze. Who's out there?
I don't know. May said Maddie is barking and growling at the door.
He peeked through the curtains. I stood, and the room swirled around me. I don't feel so good. He looked back and set the gun aside. My vision blurred, and I staggered. Bryson carried me through the house. By the time we reached the backyard, I could barely lift my head. The fatigue settled into my bones, making the smallest movement difficult. He sank to his knees and kissed me, hard. His magic burst through our connection like a phantom tendril, reaching into me and pulling my spirit animal to the surface. I threw my head back and screamed as she tore through my defenses. My vision sharpened as I soared, struggling to hold on to some hint of control. The firebird fought me at every turn. Movement below drew my attention as we circled back toward the house. Shadowy figures ran toward the road. Men shouted, but I couldn't make out their words, only their fear. My anger came through her as she shrieked and dove for the closest man. She wanted fire and blood. I remembered her rage. We'd killed before. The great hawk called to us, causing her to hesitate. In her moment of weakness, I grappled for control. The human half of me pushed forward. I had this sensation of magic flowing back into my body, and panicked. If I shifted from this height, I'd fall to my death. Sure, we'd rise again, but I didn't like the idea of splattering onto the ground. I loosened my grip on her enough to maintain my current form and turned back toward the house. She bucked and pushed, testing my hold, but settled as we approached Bryson. Once safely on the ground, I shifted. Before I could tell him I'd managed to control her, he drew me into his arms.
We need to claim each other as mates. Enough is enough.
Bryson crushed me against his chest. Chapter 38. Bryson and I stood in the middle of the backyard, him fully clothed, me naked as a jaybird, and dumbfounded by his demand that we officially become mates. Now?
Yes, now. I couldn't stop them. If we were mated, I would have sensed the attack.
His fingers bit into my arms. The elders? I didn't get a look at their faces, but who else would come here and try to hurt me? His jaw tensed and his eyes darkened. I thought he might shake me, but he released my arms and bowed his head. I'm sorry. I'm still foggy. I can't believe they came here. I shivered in the chilly night air. Can we go inside? He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and walked me into the house.
Did you recognize them?
No. I saw 5 men piling into 2 pickup trucks. I don't remember the color. At the time, I was trying to keep the firebird from lighting them up. I stepped away from him and went into the bathroom for my robe.
You should have.
Bryson frowned. I don't need any more blood on my hands. Besides, I can't begin to imagine the hell killing the elders would unleash on us.
I need to put an end to this.
I agree, but we have to do it smart, or it will end poorly for all of us. I sighed. Besides, we can't be sure who it was out there.
You should have attacked. Burns are hard to heal.
I ignored his comment. Why didn't you shift and come with me?
It took quite a bit of energy to draw her out of you. She'd nearly gone dormant.
He motioned to the couch.
I'll speak to Buck tomorrow. He'll tell me if the council ordered the attack.
Then what?
Then we find a way to stop this from happening again.
He drew a breath and looked away.
We need to talk.
I curled up in the corner of the couch. The look in his eyes made my stomach hurt.
If we had said the words and completed the ritual, I would have felt the spell when it first started. I could have protected you tonight. I could speak in your place with the elders.
You're the one who didn't want to make any decisions. I couldn't understand why he behaved as if I'd put up objections to our relationship.
I was wrong.
I chewed the cuticle on my thumb, tasting blood.
Tessa.
A better chance to tell him how I felt wouldn't come along, but I couldn't get my mouth and brain to sync up.
I think it's time.
I want to be human. The words tumbled out of me. He furrowed his brow.
What?
Sheila, Charlie, and Scarlett all said I would have to make a choice to keep the firebird or let her go. I don't want it. I want to be normal again. His eyes widened and his face paled.
You don't know what you're saying.
Yes, I do. I didn't understand why he argued. This is my choice.
Baby, listen to me. You don't know what that means.
The horror in his voice shook me to my core. Then explain it to me.
You'd be dead right now if not for your magic.
I shrugged. I wouldn't have been shot at in the first place. He hung his head.
I'm sorry. You're right. It's your decision.
What aren't you telling me? He stood with a stoic expression so unlike him, but it hurt me to see it.
It's getting late.
I knew what his response would be before I spoke. Is it because you can't do the mating ritual with a human? Let's do it now before I change back.
I overreacted. We should take some time. Think it through.
No, that's bullshit. I stood, ready to go toe to toe. I couldn't handle any more rejection. He wanted me or he didn't. Will you leave me because I want to be human?
No. I'd give up my hawk for you.
A sliver of a smile curled his lips.
If that's what I have to do.
That I remained standing after the verbal gut punch was a miracle. I knew he meant what he said, but I couldn't ask that of him. He wanted the best for me, but I didn't know good from bad anymore. I'd had non-stop drama since the day Charlie died and needed my world to return to normal. However, every decision I made created new chaos. The phone rang, and Bryson went into the kitchen to answer. I ignored the conversation, too wrapped up in myself to care. He moved to the door.
I'll be back in a few minutes.
Where are you going?
To talk to May and Dottie.
Oh, no. I forgot. Dottie must be terrified. I'll go with you. I ran into my room to get dressed. I'd officially earned the Worst Family Member of the Year award. While I sat arguing with Bryson, Dottie was probably worried sick about John Macon hurting her again.
What's going on? You mentioned a history between Dottie and John Macon?
My need to confide in him warred with my promise to respect Dottie's privacy. She asked me not to tell anyone the details. All I can say is she is afraid of Macon, and we need to make sure she's okay.
I'll trust your judgment.
He opened the door and stepped outside, likely looking for danger. As we walked side by side down the path to May's, I scrutinized the field on the edge of the property. I opened the door between myself and the firebird, and my vision sharpened. I could make out moving blobs of light in the darkness. Nothing large enough to be human. There's no one out there, I said.
You can see in this light.
I sealed my spirit animal away, and my sight returned to normal. When I steal a little magic from the firebird, I can see heat signatures. Is that infrared?
Yes, and unusual, because birds don't have that type of sight.
He stopped walking.
What do you mean, steal magic?
I shrugged, feeling self-conscious. It's more like borrowing. I imagined cracking open a door between us and letting her magic through. He stared until I looked away.
I've failed you.
Bryson closed his eyes. That's ridiculous. He took my hands.
You're a house divided. You are the firebird, and she is you. You can't keep that part of yourself separate. It would be like only using your liver once in a while.
I shook my head. I can't control her as it is. How am I supposed to let her out all the time? He smiled.
Because you'll learn to use what you need when you need it.
I don't feel your hawk all the time.
Because I don't need that part of myself all the time.
He pulled me to his chest. I don't understand. You've told me to hold her back, to control her.
It's a misnomer. What I mean is for you to hold back and control your urges.
If that's the case, I'm doomed. I don't have anything close to your self-control.
No, but you're more stubborn than I am.
We continued walking in silence. I couldn't quite wrap my brain around how to function with that much magic flowing through me. Though I could see how using it throughout the day would lessen the shock of releasing it all at once. He knocked on the door.
May, it's Bryson.
I stood a few feet away, unsure if May would welcome me into her house. The door opened a sliver.
You didn't need to come. I told you we were fine.
Maddie managed to get her nose in the crack and wiggle until May widened the gap. At least the dog was happy to see us.
I wanted to make sure.
He bent to scratch the dog's ears. I stepped forward. Graham? How's Dottie? May looked to me, and her expression softened.
She's a little shaken up, but Maddie made enough racket that they didn't bother to come here.
Bryson knelt and rubbed the dog's chest.
Good girl.
Mouth open and tongue out, Maddie wagged the back half of her body. She seemed pleased with herself, or maybe she figured May would make her eggs in the morning. May patted her leg, and the dog returned to her side.
Maddie and I are tuckered out. We're going back to bed. Bryson, come by in the morning and tell me what's going on. Tessa Marie, call your mama.
May closed the door. Bryson turned and grinned.
She's kidnapped my dog.
Looks that way for now. She'll send her back next time Maddie steals food off the table.
Good point.
I slid my hand in his as we walked home. I'm tired of arguing with you.
Everything doesn't have to be an argument, but we need to talk about this.
He drew a breath, as if about to launch into a lecture. No more talking tonight. I released him and jogged up the path. The more distance I put between us, the less I'd hear if he decided to run down his top 10 list of reasons why I needed to control my magic, keep my magic, grow up, or not have sex. He caught up with me and took my hand.
Sleep with me tonight.
I cast him a sideways glance. You turned me down not an hour ago.
Sleep beside me tonight.
Bryson's expression made me wonder if his invitation had included more. Heaven help me if I'd refused an actual proposition. I needed a bigger mouth or smaller feet to make it with Bryson long term. Chapter 39. The morning sun brightened the room, but the smile on my face had nothing to do with the weather. Bryson and I had spent the rest of our weekend together. During the days, we tidied our offices and replenished our supplies. In the evenings, we'd rekindled our relationship and tested the limits of my self-control, which had improved quite a bit, though not enough to break the dry spell. I stretched out on the king-sized bed, marveling at the sheets. I didn't know anything could feel this soft. Good morning. I can't believe it's Monday.
How'd you sleep?
Bryson handed me a cup of coffee and settled in to watch the morning news. Other than your snoring keeping me up, I scooted close and sipped my coffee. Have you noticed my emotions and the firebird have chilled out? He slid his arm around me.
I think it has something to do with spending time with me.
I laughed. That's a little self-serving, but I agree.
I spoke to Buck. He claims the elders didn't order the attack on you.
Skepticism ruined any relief I might have felt at the news. Do you believe him?
Buck may bend the rules and twist the truth, but he wouldn't outright lie. Not about Council of Elders business.
So, it's a bunch of vigilantes seeking justice because I turned their wives into sex kittens?
That'd be my guess.
The news anchor's expression grew serious.
Up next, why the Orange County Police Department sent a SWAT team and several uniformed officers to the Orlando Ballet for 3 nights and how much the debacle cost taxpayers.
Oh, shit! I bolted upright, sloshing coffee on the expensive sheets. Has Aaron called? Bryson checked his phone.
Not me.
I scrambled out of bed and hustled to the kitchen where I'd left my phone. I had 7 missed calls from Aaron and 2 from Samuels. This isn't good.
Never is.
I slid into my robe as the phone rang. Hi, Aaron.
Have you seen the news?
He sounded like death on a cracker. Watching it now. I'm sorry. Gavin seemed so sure about the ballet. He drew a breath.
The killer hit again last night. We have 7 dead synchronized swimmers at the aquatic center.
I sank to the edge of the bed. Oh, Aaron, I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault. Can you come to the station? Chief wants you in on the debriefings. We have to catch this guy.
Of course. I'll be there in half an hour. I set the phone down when he disconnected. On the television, a reporter stood outside the aquatic center. Coroners' vans and ambulances marred the otherwise beautiful building. Bryson moved to my side.
This isn't your fault.
We went with the obvious choice, and people died. I pulled away. Aaron sounds awful. I bet he hasn't slept in days. He stood and pulled on a pair of PJ pants.
I'll make sure he gets some rest at some point today.
Thanks. I stared at the TV, stunned by the images scrolling across the screen.
Get a shower. I'll make some breakfast.
I should look in on May and Dottie.
Already done.
I'd never get used to living with a morning person. Bryson had accomplished more while I slept than I would before dinner. How'd they take it?
They're worried about you.
So what else is new? I showered and dressed in record time. Armed with a thermos of coffee and Bryson's laptop, I kissed him goodbye and headed out. I arrived at the station and went straight to the conference room. A handful of uniformed officers nodded their greetings, but no one spoke. Tension hung thick in the air, ratcheting up my nervous energy. I spread my research notes before me and pretended to read. The chief entered the room, followed by Aaron and Samuels. The men wore stone faces and wrinkled clothes as they took their seats. Aaron nodded in my direction, then turned his attention to the chief.
Miss Lamar, thank you for joining us. I understand it was your tip that caused my SWAT team to be deployed 5 miles from the actual murders.
The older man stared until I squirmed. Yes, Chief. It was my mistake.
Good catch on the tie-in between the murders. I would have assumed the ballet would be the next target too, but let this be a lesson. We don't assume. We can't afford to miss this guy again.
I nodded and focused on my notes. Despite his gruffness, I liked the guy. As far as bosses went, he treated his employees fairly and didn't mock my psychic abilities. Then again, I'd proven myself the real deal in several investigations. Chief stood and wrote on the whiteboard.
What we know is the shooter is a pro, or good enough to be a pro. He's familiar with the buildings and the schedules of the Vics. His M.O. is inconsistent, and he's following the lyrics of the 12 Days of Christmas.
I glanced at Aaron. Why hadn't he told them what the spirits had said to me? Sir, if I may, one of the shooter's names is Terrence Pierce. He worked for the CVB for years before he took a job in Vegas.
Lamar Terrence Pierce has an airtight alibi for the McNamara and Aquatic Center murders.
There are two perps. Partridge, black, and Callan's killer had dark hair. Aaron sighed.
We arrested Michael Adams in the Partridge case.
My mouth fell open. I wasn't ready to believe Michael killed his husband. Why?
Fingernail scrapings from the day of the murder included the Vic's skin. He also had defensive wounds on his chest.
They were newlyweds. Skin under fingernails happens when people have sex, as do claw marks. I regretted the words as soon as they flew out of my mouth. Several of the uniformed officers snickered. Chief cleared his throat.
We need to focus, people. What's the next lyric?
Samuels gave me a look that told me to zip it up.
Ain't made some milking.
Chief nodded.
Who has the performer and vendor lists from the CVB?
Samuels handed each of us a copy of the documents.
Any thoughts on the next target?
Chief flipped through the report. The sounds of pages turning filled the room. I focused my magic and mentally called to Gavin Partridge. He knew the people involved better than anyone. Gavin appeared in the chair next to mine, with his ankle on his knee and arms folded.
I have nothing to say to you.
I didn't dare speak out loud to a ghost in a room full of exhausted police officers. Instead, I risked making an idiot of myself by asking questions to the group, in hopes Gavin would answer. Since there are no acts called milkmaids, are there any dairy suppliers? Pages turned and heads shook, but no one spoke, including Gavin. Aaron said,
Looks like T.G. Lee is supplying fancy 8-ounce individual milks. Can someone find out what makes them fancy?
Gavin rolled his eyes.
They're little cartons with wide mouths to dip cookies.
I said, wide-mouth cartons that allow kids to dip cookies.
What are you, a bloody parrot?
Gavin leaned into my personal space.
I have these 7 swimmers waiting in the hall, not a happy group.
I don't want to know how you know that.
Chief eyed me.
Lamar, what's going on over there?
I caught myself leaning to the right, far enough that if someone sneezed, I'd fall out of the chair. I sat straight, which put Gavin's ghost against my face. Nothing, sir? Samuel snickered. An officer said, Could be the people milking the cows.
They use machines for that.
Aaron flipped the page on his report.
We're using adorable old ladies dressed as Victorian maids,
Gavin said. I slid into the next chair.
Lamar, did someone forget their deodorant this morning?
Chief glared. No, sir.
Then would you mind sitting in one chair?
I sighed, tired of dancing around the topic. I'm sorry. There's a ghost. Gavin Partridge is here, and he's driving me nuts. The uniformed guys lost it, while Aaron and Samuels looked away. They hired elderly women to serve milk and cookies in Victorian maid costumes. The laughter stopped, and all eyes turned to me.
Do these women come from a particular company?
Chief narrowed his eyes. I glanced at Gavin, who turned his back to me. He's not inclined to share the information at the moment. I motioned to where the ghost pouted. He's a serious pain in the ass.
I can't believe I'm doing this.
Chief made the sign of the cross.
Mr. Partridge, I would be grateful if you would assist us in our effort to save lives.
Gavin huffed.
T&T Staffing hired the women.
There are 25 total.
I relayed the message, and the meeting ended with assignments for everyone. Everyone, that is, except me. I trailed behind the Chief, Aaron, and Samuels. Chief, I'd like permission to visit the ice rink and aquatic center.
Absolutely not. We have video of the Callan murder. News crews are all over the aquatic center. You aren't to go anywhere near the media. I won't have a repeat of the last time. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Given we believe the killings are related, has the event been canceled? The chief's left eye twitched.
The mayor is aware of the situation. He insists the event must happen. The city stands to lose its reputation and a good deal of taxpayer dollars if they cancel.
Chapter 40. 2 weeks had gone by without another murder or a peep from the elders. I'd seen Aaron in passing at the station. A nervous tension hung in the air that had nothing to do with Christmas being only 10 days away. With so many active homicide investigations, he hadn't had time to visit. Bryson spent most of his time in his studio working on a sculpture, while I caught up on my paperwork or puttered around the house. Maddie barked at the door like the devil himself stood on the porch. I peeked out the window and frowned. 3 cars were parked on the side lawn, but no one had come to the door. Bryson had taken May and Dottie to the Christmas tree farm and wouldn't be home for a couple of hours at best. I checked the locks and tiptoed into my room for Charlie's shotgun. If the elders had something else planned today, I wanted to be ready. The house phone rang, and I nearly dropped the gun. Hello? Tessa, this is Tanya Jones. I have the girls here with me. Can we come in? Her voice sounded strained. Miss Jones, the medicine shop is closed. The elders banished me and forbade us from helping anyone. I squinted at the shadows moving on the other side of the windows. Maddie went into full guard dog mode, barking her deepest, scariest bark. The hair between her shoulders raised as she dropped her head to the crack at the bottom of the door and growled. Are you on my porch? Maddie's reaction scared me. Tessa, please, open the door. We have Betty Matthews, and she's not doing well. Give me a minute. I tugged Maddie into Bryson's bedroom. She whined and scratched, but her barking had stopped by the time I opened the front door. We're real sorry about this. Tanya stepped inside, followed by 2 women holding Betty between them. The 5th carried several purses and a blanket. I took a step back, not believing my eyes. Mrs. Matthews sported 2 black eyes and a bloody lip. Her hair had thinned and grayed in a matter of days. The creases on her face belonged to a woman May's age. My God, what happened to her? I led them into my room and helped situate Betty on the bed. Tanya wrung her hands. I found her this morning when she didn't answer her phone. Where's Mr. Matthews? On a deer hunt with our husbands. They'll be gone several days. I had a sneaking suspicion Mr. Matthews had lied about his quarry. Betty's pulse beat weak beneath my fingertips, and she labored to breathe. We should call an ambulance. Their grim faces told me I'd missed something. You need to see her back. 2 of the ladies eased Betty to her side. Bloody straps ran from her shoulders to her waist, causing her blouse to stick to the wounds. I leaned closer and froze. Wolf attack. I set my hands a few inches above her and whispered a healing chant. Her body pulsed with pain, but something else pushed against my spell. My voice grew louder as the tainted magic fought me at every turn. Whoever had injured Betty Matthews had attacked her on a spiritual level as well as a physical one. I turned to the women. Has she said anything?" "No," Tanya said. "Did anyone hear or see anything strange last night, like chanting or people outside your houses?" Tanya shrugged. "My dogs were raising Cain." Two of the others nodded in agreement. "Does anyone know you're here?" My pulse sped. I had a sinking feeling what happened to Betty was a message from John Macon. "No," Tanya answered. I surveyed their worried faces. These women had reputations for gossiping, but with their queen bee hurt, I hoped they'd keep quiet. "You can't tell anyone she's here, not even your husband's. If the person who did this finds out, he might come for her again. Do you understand?" The women went wide-eyed and nodded. "I'll do my best to heal her, but y'all should go." Tanya ushered the women to the door. "Can you save her?" "Not until I know what caused this. I needed Bryson or Charlie or someone who knew where to start. Miss Tanya, is anyone expecting you at home?" "No. Betty and I had plans." She covered her mouth as tears fell to her cheeks. "Would you mind staying? I might need some help." "Yes, of course. Tell me what to do." "Before we get started, I'm going to have you park your car in the old garage out back." She nodded. "I don't know what I'm going to find. It could be dangerous." "Are you sure?" I expected her to ask questions or change her mind. "Anything. Just help, Betty." "Go move your car." I moved to the shelves and pulled down jars containing cleansing herbs. When the front door closed, I crawled under the desk and retrieved Charlie's spellbook from its hiding place. As I flipped through the pages, it occurred to me I had this woman's life in my hands. I needed to call 911, but remembered Aaron's strange sickness after the conjurer had attacked him. No amount of modern medicine could heal a disease of the soul. Poor Betty had something dark feeding on her. Did Macon do this to punish me? My brain skipped like a scratched record. Why hurt Betty? Her husband was a member of the council. A flurry of emotions rose up inside me, waking the firebird. I had to do something, but couldn't decide on the first step. Bryson would know. I ran into the front room and dialed his cell. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message and went back to Mrs. Matthews. I drew a breath and centered myself. "Mother, Charlie, guide my hands and open my eyes." I lit a sage smudge stick. The earthy scent soothed my nerves and cleared away any bad spirits as I walked the house. While in the bathroom, I pulled the shower curtain off the rod and set it beside my twin bed, along with towels, washcloths, and clean blankets from the hall closet. Tanya returned as I chanted a spell of peace and healing over Betty. The car's put away. She looked as skittish as a cat in a dog yard. And I locked the door. I smiled, trying to reassure her. Take a few breaths to calm your energy. She needs us to be at peace while we work. No matter what, believe we can help her. I'll try. I need a large bowl of water. Look in the first cabinet to the left. There's a big red bowl. Tanya hurried out of the room. I took the opportunity to coax the firebird to the surface. I'd need the extra strength to lift Miss Betty without causing her further harm. Tanya returned and set the bowl on the nightstand. I'm going to pick her up. Spread the shower curtain on the bed, then put a blanket over it. Are you sure? She's heavy. I slid one arm under Betty's neck, the other under her knees, and lifted her from the bed. Tanya blinked a couple of times, then put the plastic liner on the bed, followed by the blanket. She eyed me as I eased Betty down. How did you do that? She weighs almost twice as much as you. No questions. My voice came out firmer than I'd intended, but Bryson's warning about emulating human magic echoed through my head. We removed Betty's shoes and pants, but when we opened her blouse, bruises dotted her chest and arms. I had to look away from the finger-shaped marks on her neck. Tanya wept as we cleaned and covered her friend. It's all right. Stay calm. Let's turn her on her side. We worked together to dampen Betty's shirt and peel the fabric away from the wounds. The bleeding had stopped, but when we moved her, the lacerations opened like fish gills, and fresh blood flowed onto the blanket. I grabbed a handful of clean cloths and pressed them to the wounds as I eased the unconscious woman to her stomach. Come put pressure on these. I need to make a poultice to stop the bleeding. Tanya's face paled. You can't do this. She nodded and pressed her hands to the washcloths. How do you stay so calm? I have to be centered to do magic. I filled the mortar with Charlie's secret blend of cleansing herbs and added a few drops of purified water. Added enough cayenne pepper to fill 3/4 of the bowl and stirred the mixture into a paste. Tanya wrinkled her nose. Is that pepper? Yes, it'll stop the bleeding. I'll stitch her up later. I pulled the first cloth away and smoothed the poultice onto the cut. I found myself chanting a spell I'd never used. The words came from someplace outside and filtered through me. The firebird moved with the cadence of the incantation, adding her magic to the mix. Once I had done all I could for her physically, I cleared away the mess and dimmed the lights. She needs rest. Tanya shifted her weight and looked from Betty to me. Will she be all right? I don't know. I gave her a hug and walked her out. Thank you for your assistance. I'll call you if there's any change. Please make sure the others don't mention this to anyone. I will. Tanya crossed the yard without a backward glance. I returned to my patient. Betty's heart beat stronger, and her breathing had evened out, yet something kept her unconscious. I remembered Dottie's story. She'd said she slept for days. I hurried to the desk and flipped through Charlie's book, hoping he'd documented the spells he used to heal and keep Dottie from turning into a wolf. I found notes regarding the care of shifter bites and scratches. However, I couldn't locate the spell I'd chanted anywhere. A noise in the hall scared the daylights out of me. I looked up and sighed. Bryson stood in the doorway, staring at the woman in my bed. Furrowed his brow and stepped into the room.
What's going on?
Didn't you get my message? I felt like I'd run a marathon in high heels carrying 50-pound weights.
No.
He moved to the bed.
I can feel the dark magic on her.
Tanya Jones and the others showed up this morning with her. Someone attacked her last night and left her for dead.
They brought her here?
Yes, because it looks like a shifter attack. The reality of the situation caused me to stagger. I hadn't had time to consider the consequences if I failed. I cleaned her up and did my best to heal her physically, but she hasn't woken. I'm hesitant to do any banishing spells until she's stronger.
Good call. It can wait.
He glanced at Betty and sighed.
Did you call her husband?
No, I believe he may be in on it. I know who did this. He hung his head. Bryson, her wounds and the magic around her? It's identical to another case. He met my gaze.
Dottie.
I leaned against the wall for support. Yes. It happened when she was still in high school. His calm reaction frightened me more than if he'd yelled.
Megan.
I wanted to say more, to get him talking so I could grasp his thoughts, but I could only muster one word. Yes. Chapter 41. Bryson and I had a quiet dinner at home. I missed joining May and Dottie's table in the evenings, but May had made it crystal clear she'd let me know when she wanted to see me. I stood at the sink washing the dishes while Bryson tended to our patient. I rinsed the last of the pots, dried my hands, and smiled at a job well done. We had fallen into the kind of routine that I thought only existed in old sitcoms. We'd get up early to sit on the porch and listen to the chorus of birds as we drank our coffee. After breakfast, he'd kiss me at the door and tell me he loved me. We'd spend our evenings in conversation or tender silence. I didn't know if it would last, but I prayed every night it would. Bryson called from across the hall.
Tessa, come quickly.
I hurried to him. Dark magic slammed into me the moment I entered my room. I staggered back, drew a calming breath, and imagined my magic surrounding me in white light. When I entered the room for the second time, I ignored the urge to leave and rushed to Betty and Bryson. Her eyes had rolled back, and she'd clawed her throat bloody in her struggle to breathe.
Something's blocking her airway.
Bryson lifted her head and shoulders off the bed.
It's nothing physical. It's the center of the spell. When I try and remove it, she chokes.
I loosened my hold on the firebird and used her strength to pull Betty's hands from her throat. Hold her with one hand and give me the other. Bryson pinned her to the pillow, then placed his free hand over mine. I made a claw shape around her throat with our hands. We'd run out of time and had to do the banishing spell. I prayed she was strong enough to fight. I met his eyes, nodded, and chanted the first recitation of the spell. White raven, draw near so you may hear my cries. Come from your resting place on high. O white raven, we beg of you. Come now and take this intruder to the dark lands and bury it deep. Seal the grave and forever keep it from returning. Your people beseech you. Come. Bryson joined me as I repeated the spell. As we blended our voices and our magic, Betty struggled to draw air into her lungs. Her blue-tinged lips gaped, but her eyes rolled back into place and locked on mine. I didn't dare turn away. Betty needed me, and I wouldn't fail her. We started the spell for the third time, and she stilled. Her airway opened enough to allow a wheezing breath to pass. However, I knew better than to loosen my hold on her arms. As the incantation came to a close, her eyes drifted shut, and her breaths evened. Do you know what brought that on? I stepped back and wiped my hands on my jeans.
No idea.
I had such hopes for another quiet evening. Someone would need to sit with her in case another magic bomb exploded inside Betty. I pulled myself together and held my hand over her throat. Be ready. Bryson moved closer. I pulsed my magic into her neck, expecting the dark energy to push back as it had before. When nothing happened, I repeated the process. I think it's gone. He held his hands an inch over Betty and worked his way from her brow to her feet until he'd covered every inch.
I don't sense anything.
Dark magic in the house gave me the willies. We didn't know what spells John had placed on her or what he was capable of. Selfishly, I wanted her awake and well so she could leave, though I knew she'd be here through at least one full moon. Should we wake her?
Not yet. I'd like to speak to Buck first.
Bryson drew me against his chest.
Will you be okay here, alone with her for a few hours?
Of course. I looked away. The idea of him going to Geneva alone turned my knees to rubber. Will John be there? Will Buck listen to what Bryson has to say? Will Buck order us to return this poor woman to her husband? What if Bryson refuses? Will they hurt him? He took my chin between his thumb and forefinger, lifting until I met his gaze.
There's nothing to worry about.
Why do people always say there's nothing to worry about when I could fill a page with my concerns? It's been so good between us.
I'll be back soon. I promise.
He pressed his lips to mine. Promises mean something, I whispered as I curled up on the sofa. Bryson sat and laced his boots.
It'll be okay, Tessa.
I put on a brave face, but couldn't shake the feeling that something would happen to him.
I'll have my phone on me. Call if anything comes up.
He kissed my cheek and turned to the door with a stoic expression.
If John Macon or any of his people come on this property, shoot them.
I laughed despite my mood. Will do.
I love you.
He winked and walked outside. I hit the remote and settled in to watch a girly holiday movie. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Gavin was leaning over me, grinning like an idiot.
Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey.
Please go away. I pulled the quilt over my head.
But I brought company.
He exaggerated the last word a la Oprah. I sat up and met the eyes of two elderly women dressed as Victorian maids, with bullet holes in their foreheads. The contrast between their sweet grandmotherly faces and the gore proved to be my last straw.
Oh, honey, it's okay. Your friend with the blue eyes saved 6 of them. These 2 happened to be getting fitted for their costumes when Terrence found them.
Gavin tried to hug me, but his arm passed through. I turned to the ghosts. I'm so sorry this happened to you. They glanced at each other and back to me, confused. Gavin leaned closer and whispered,
They don't know what's happened, poor dears.
I grabbed a tissue and blew my nose. That happens sometimes when they first cross over.
I remember.
He stared off, then looked back to me and smiled.
9 ladies dancing has to be the ballet.
I've given them the information. Now, we have to let the police do their jobs. Gavin furrowed his brow and turned his head toward the hall.
What is that smell?
You can smell? He marched through the wall into my bedroom. I hurried after him and opened the door. Betty still lay in the same position we'd left her. I doubted she'd moved at all. I don't smell anything. Gavin sniffed the air close to the bed and covered his nose and mouth.
Honey, it smells like something is rotten. Are you sure she's alive?
I moved to Betty and checked her pulse. Her heart's beating and she's breathing. He blanched and made gagging sounds. Honestly, I'm surprised you're so rude. Michael spoke so highly of you.
I've discovered my inner asshole since being murdered. Sue me.
He lowered his hand for half a second and put it back over his face.
Tessa, I'm serious. Something's wrong here.
I held my hand over Betty's head and reached out with my magic. As I moved down her body, I didn't sense any magic. To be sure, I chanted another banishing spell.
What is it?
Gavin backed toward the door. I don't know. We're getting close to the full moon. Maybe she's going to turn. I lit another sage stick and left the room.
You mean like a werewolf?
Yes?
You're kidding.
Gavin leaned in my face.
What's wrong with your eyes?
You've got to stop getting so close. I turned away. Though I'd grown used to his appearance, I didn't need to see it up close and personal.
Your pupils are on fire.
He shook his head, as if trying to find a better explanation.
And your hair.
I hurried to the bathroom mirror. Sure enough, the tips of my hair had turned to flames, along with my eyes. This only happened when I lost control and was on the verge of shifting. I took a few calming breaths and looked again. Still flaming.
Okay, hell girl. You have some explaining to do.
Gavin stood behind me with his hands on his hips.
Are you a demon? This is hell, isn't it? I should have known by the cheap furniture and pictures of ducks on the walls.
I'm not a demon. I'm a Nunnehi.
A Nunna what?
Nunnehi, I sighed. A type of fairy.
Is that why you can see me?
Yes. No. I don't know. Maybe. Other Nunnehi can't see you.
Others?
He grinned.
The big guy, Bryson? What about the blue-eyed cop? He looked a little fairy to me.
Let's leave the guys out of the conversation. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. I could chant Gavin away, but I needed him to distract me from worrying about Bryson. The firebird could sense her mate, so he was alive. Beyond that, I had no idea what Bryson had done or what Macon might have done to him.
9 ladies dancing. I have several dance acts booked, but none with a cast that large.
He'd switched the subject so fast it took me a second to catch up. I'll call Aaron when the sun comes up. I don't want to wake him.
He's not sleeping. He's working the murder scene of Mrs. Potts and Nanny McPhee in there.
Then he's busy. I'll call him in the morning. Gavin rolled his eyes.
The sun's coming up as we speak, my dear.
I need to try to sleep. Would you mind taking the maids and leaving? Gavin waved his hand, and the spirits of the elderly women vanished.
They're creepy. The way they stand there and stare.
Pot calling the kettle black. I moved to the couch, but Gavin appeared where I'd planned to sit.
You might not want to put your head near anything flammable.
He put his fingertip on my hair.
Is it hot?
I assume so. He raised his head at an unnatural angle.
Put some paper against it.
Gavin, do I have to cast you out again? I rolled my neck from side to side to relieve the tension.
Do this one thing, and I'll go.
Performing parlor tricks for an annoying ghost ranked up there with tetanus shots. I stomped to the kitchen and pulled a sheet of paper from the notepad. When I held it to my hair, the paper smoldered and turned black. I tossed it in the sink and doused the flame before glaring at him. Done! Now go!
That's simply the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Gavin moved closer.
How did you turn it off?
My skin warmed as the firebird rose. One, or both of us, wanted to throttle him.
What? The flame's out.
He ran his ghost hand through my head. I waved my arms in an attempt to get him to back off. All right, enough already. I said go. Get out of my house.
Tessa Marie, is that any way to talk to your mother?
My mom stood in the doorway with her hand on her hip. Any hope of sleep vanished with the smacking of Darlene's gum. Gavin's company didn't seem that bad after all. Hi, Mama. Sorry, I wasn't talking to you. She pulled her oversized sunglasses down her nose and looked around. Uh-huh. Gavin grinned.
Oh, this is your mother. Interesting.
I was talking to the spirits, but they're gone now. I forced a smile and motioned to the kitchen. I couldn't get away with drinking this early, but carbs would help take the edge off. I'm going to cook breakfast. Are you hungry? Are you sure they're gone? You and I have things to discuss. Darlene eyed me, glanced around the room again, and strutted into the kitchen. What's going on with your hair?
I'm not going anywhere. I love mama drama.
Gavin perched on the kitchen table. My hair? I lifted the ends, hoping they hadn't reignited. What's wrong with it? She stomped to me and lifted my curls. From outside, it looked like it was on fire. I laughed too loud. Oh, I just had them put a gloss on it to make it shiny. Do you like it? Looks trashy. She wrinkled her nose. Pancakes? Gavin barked out a laugh.
Trashy. Has she looked in the mirror lately?
I put a pan on the stove to heat as I mixed the batter. I'm sorry I lost my temper at Thanksgiving. Darlene waved her hand.
Forget about it. That's not why I'm here. I need you to come with me to my doctor's appointments.
I glanced over my shoulder. Stone can't take you? She smoothed her shirt over her belly. Well, one look at her and I knew she'd lied. Unless Darlene carried quintuplets, her pregnancy had passed the first trimester. How could she saddle a decent man with a child that didn't belong to him? How could she think she could pull off lying to the entire family? This baby didn't stand a chance at normal life. Mama, how far along are you? Gavin laughed.
This is better than the soaps.
Chapter 42. Darlene's smile wilted. I don't know, but Stone can't find out. I flipped the pancake onto a plate and set it in front of her. I take it he's not the father? She narrowed her eyes. It takes more than a few beers and a dry hump to make a father, Tessa Marie. Gavin, sitting on the table, superimposed over my mother's breakfast, shook his head.
I think it was more than a dry hump.
My appetite didn't stand a chance against this conversation. I turned the stove off and leaned against the counter. How are you going to explain giving birth weeks early? I don't know. I'll come up with something. She shoveled a large bite into her mouth. But for now, I need you to go with me to my appointments. I can't have them talking about due dates and weeks along in front of him. Mama, Stone seems like a good guy. I think he cares for you. Why not tell him the truth? She burst into tears as if she'd rehearsed the scene. I can't tell him. What if he leaves me? I can't raise another child alone. You have no idea how hard it is to be a mother. I ask one thing from you, and this is what I get. One thing, Tessa. Is that too much to expect? My mouth hung open. I'd witnessed her theatrics my entire life, but this performance topped them all. I'm not lying for you. She wiped her nose on the back of her hand. Please, Tessa, I really love this one. He's going to make a fine father. I'm sorry, but I won't do it. Gavin made a tisking sound.
Tough crowd. She's your mother, and she's obviously hormonal.
She's not my mother. I pointed at Gavin. You have no idea what you're talking about. Leave me alone or I'll banish you. Darlene went wide-eyed and scrambled out of her chair. You've lost your mind. I sighed. Mama, please. You wait till May hears about this. She tucked her purse onto her shoulder. Mama, you just wait. You and your trashy hair are going to wish you'd... Darlene slammed the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the walls. I hung my head, already wishing I'd never been born. How much worse could it get?
Family. Can't pick them, can't shoot them. The only choice is to love them. Anywho, I should be going.
Gavin sauntered into the living room.
Don't forget to call Officer Blue Eyes.
Wait! Do you know that Michael was arrested?
Yes.
His shoulders fell.
I sit with him sometimes.
He's innocent, right? I'd seen the killing, but I had to ask. Michael had dark hair, and the vision was distorted. At this point, anything was possible.
Yes.
He looked me in the eye.
Until Terrence is caught, jail is the safest place for Michael.
I hated that I agreed with his assessment. My muscles groaned when I stood. If I didn't get some sleep soon, I'd join Gavin on the other side. I should check on Betty.
Bye, Tessa. It's been an enlightening experience. Downright explosive.
He chuckled and winked out of view. Since Gavin had pointed out the odor in the room, sitting with Betty gave me the willies. I opened the curtains and cracked the windows in the bedroom to allow fresh air to drift through the space. As a bonus, the breeze helped calm the chaos in my mind. I took Charlie's book from the desk and scoured it page by painstaking page, searching for a spell that could help Betty. A handful showed promise, but I decided to wait for Bryson to return before attempting them. We may not have said the words, but we were stronger together. 3 hard knocks on the front door woke me from my daze. The part of my brain that lived under a rain cloud feared the police had come to tell me something had happened to Bryson. I peeked out the window and sighed in relief. Aaron stood on the porch with his hands in his pockets. My hands still trembled as I opened the door. "Hey, what a surprise! Come in." He looked like last month's leftovers and smelled almost as bad. Dark circles shadowed his eyes.
Sorry to show up without calling.
I closed the door behind him and forced a smile. "You're always welcome here. Are you hungry? Can I get you something to drink?" He glanced around the room.
Is Bryson here?
"No, he's dealing with some tribal business." I went into the kitchen. "Tea? Beer or water?"
Water, please.
He sat at the kitchen table.
We can't get ahead in this case. We're running 3 steps behind at every turn.
I handed him the bottle and turned back to the fridge for something to feed him. "Gavin Partridge filled me in earlier. He said you saved 6 women. That's something." Aaron looked as if he didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
Did he say anything about the 9 ladies dancing?
I emptied a container of frozen stew into a pan and joined Aaron at the table. He's convinced it's the ballet. They're the only dance act with 9 women.
We have men on them around the clock.
He downed the water in one pull.
Have you seen the news today?
I shook my head.
Someone put the pieces together. The media is calling this guy the Christmas killer.
That complicates things, but it may help you convince potential victims there's a real threat. I took his hand to lend what support I could. Have you considered that there are more than 2 perps?
It sure looks that way.
I hopped up to stir the stew. My need to take care of Aaron gave me my second wind. Go take a shower while this heats up. The clothes you loaned Bryson and I are on the dresser in the master bedroom. He eased from the chair and wandered down the hall. 2 minutes later, he called from the back of the house.
Hey, Tessa, where's the shower curtain?
Chapter 43. After MacGyvering a shower curtain out of a sheet and hair clips, I returned to the kitchen. The stew hung on by a thumbnail. Another minute, and I would have had to throw it out. We needed some bread with the meal. Lucky for me, May always froze her extra biscuit dough. I put a handful on a cookie sheet and sliced some apples. Aaron returned to the kitchen in low-slung sweats and a t-shirt.
Who's the woman in your bed?
I dropped the serving spoon, sending brown gravy across the wood floor. It's a long story.
I have time.
He knelt down with me to clean the mess. She's a member of the tribe, here for healing. I avoided his eyes. He had his cop face on, and I couldn't risk him calling it into the station. Aaron turned me to face him.
She looks like she ran into a fist.
My eyes drifted to his mouth. The desire to kiss him took me by surprise almost as much as the firebird's reaction to his proximity. She stretched and preened the way she did when Bryson touched me.
What is that?
Hmm? I tilted my head. You feel it? He nodded.
It feels like you're running your hand through me.
It's my spirit animal calling to your magic. He stood.
This is a lot to take in.
I took his hand and came to my feet. We should eat while it's still warm. He stared as I filled our bowls and pulled the biscuits from the oven.
Why do I get the feeling there's a lot you're not telling me?
It could be your suspicious cop nature. I grinned and took my seat. I needed to sort this out before I tried to explain things to Aaron. He sank into his chair and pushed the food around with his spoon.
I thought we agreed. No more secrets.
When's the last time you slept? I wasted no time in digging in. Besides the fact I hadn't eaten in forever, food would help stave off my other urges.
I napped in the squad car last night.
He shrugged. Eat. You're giving me a complex.
You cooked this?
He quirked a brow. I'll have you know I'm an exceptional cook. But no, May cooked it and froze the leftovers. Once he took the first bite, he inhaled the remainder of the bowl and 3 biscuits. I enjoyed watching him eat, knowing in some small way I'd taken care of him. The feeling surprised me on many levels. I'd never considered myself the domestic type.
What happened to the woman in your room?
Aaron pushed his empty bowl aside. She was attacked by a shifter, a wolf from the looks of it. She's under a spell or curse, and I haven't been able to break it.
Sounds familiar.
I stood and cleared the dishes. I hope Bryson gets some answers. He's been gone a long time.
I wouldn't worry about him. He can take care of himself.
Aaron stood to help me tidy the kitchen. Sit. I have this. I frowned when he filled the sink with soapy water.
It goes faster with 2 people.
He's been gone over 24 hours without checking in. I'm worried.
Don't you have a connection or something? Can you tell if he's all right?
I know he's alive. I could find him if I shifted into the firebird. He's sort of a homing beacon for her. I put the leftover stew in a container. Aaron grabbed my arm.
When I left the scene tonight, I planned to go home. I don't remember driving, but I ended up here.
That happens to me sometimes. Life on autopilot. I smiled, trying my best to normalize the situation. I didn't want to have this conversation without Bryson present.
Stop dancing around the question. This is what Bryson meant when he said we were mates, isn't it?
I nodded.
Will you show me?
Show you what?
The firebird. I was too stunned to get a look at her. You. It is you, right?
I considered the question. I'd always thought of the spirit animal as a separate entity. She's a part of me, but separate. Sometimes it feels like I have 2 brains running the show, especially when I shift.
That's why you need to learn to control it.
He leaned closer. Yes? I turned my face to his.
I understand. Since I woke up in the hospital, I've wanted to touch you, but I know I shouldn't. Those nights with you and Bryson were the first time I felt whole in months.
He nuzzled my cheek.
I want to see her.
It occurred to me that none of us knew what parts of Bryson Aaron had gained. Did it work like a brick? A chip off a brick was still a brick. Or were there pieces, unique parts like a finger or sense of humor? Did Aaron inherit Bryson's magic? His ability to shift? We should wait. I don't know what will happen.
What do you think will happen?
He ran his hands up and down my arms. For one thing, you could change into a hawk.
You're shitting me.
Aaron laughed.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, well, the front door opened and Bryson stepped in. I ran to him, burying my head in his chest. The scent of wood smoke burned my nose, but I held him tight. He slid his arms around me and rested his cheek on my head. "What happened? I was worried," I murmured. He kissed the top of my head.
"Buck's on our side."
"Thank goodness." Aaron stepped into the room and hesitated. Bryson grinned.
"Did I interrupt something?"
Aaron and I looked at each other and back to Bryson, who chuckled.
"Relax. We haven't had time to get into it, but I'm cool with the two of you exploring without me."
I would never get used to this. My guilty conscience, years in Sunday school, and fear of abandonment would never allow me to survive in a polyamorous relationship. Aaron asked me to shift for him. I'm concerned the firebird might cause something to happen. Bryson held back more laughter.
"Such as?"
I shrugged. "I don't know. What if he shifts?" Bryson ran his hand over his chin.
"It's possible. Magic is magic. You have it or you don't. There are no percentages or half-breeds."
Oh. I needed some time to mull that little tidbit over. Questions came to mind, but they'd wait until we could speak freely. "Tell me what happened with Buck." Bryson said,
"I need a shower first. Take him out back and shift. I'll keep an ear out for screaming."
Aaron grinned.
"Good luck, man. She used the shower curtain as a mattress liner. I forgot about that. I could hose off out back. It might come in handy if you get worked up."
We hung a sheet. It's not too bad, unless the spray hits it directly. I shook my head. They would be the death of me, or at least the death of what sanity I had left. All right, let's go. But I refuse to take responsibility if something goes wrong.
"You kids have fun."
Bryson walked toward the hall. Aaron took my hand and half dragged me out the back door. I chewed the inside of my lip. Showing him the firebird would involve me getting naked, something I hadn't thought through. Given the sexual tension between us in the kitchen, I second-guessed my decision to do this. "Turn around."
"No, I want to see the process."
Aaron folded his arms.
"Do you morph with crunching bones and goo like in the movies?"
I shook my head. "You saw it the other day."
"Like I said, it was fast."
I motioned for him to turn. He threw his hands up and put his back to me.
"Happy?"
"Yes." I stripped down to nothing and focused on the firebird. Easy to do, considering she'd waited just below the surface since he arrived. "Okay." Aaron turned around and drew a breath.
"My God."
I met his eyes. "You've seen me before. I was in your bed for 3 days."
"Asleep under a sheet?"
My cheeks heated, but I didn't look away. My magic rose, and I threw my head back as the firebird burst free. She stretched her wings at her sides and soared into the night sky. Aaron watched with an awestruck expression. She changed course and dove toward him, recognizing her mate. The firebird cried out for him to join her as she circled overhead. I felt her confusion, and then her understanding when he didn't follow. For the first time, she shrank back and gave me control without a fight. I glided earthward and landed a few feet from Aaron. He knelt and held his hand out to me as if I were a scared animal. My laughter came out in a series of chirps. He stretched to touch me, and I shrank away. My feathers still blazed.
"You won't burn me,"
he whispered. I dipped my head, allowing him to scratch my head. His fingers traced the length of my wing. His expression softened. At that moment, I believed I was beautiful. I opened my eyes as Aaron's fingertips moved over my collarbone and to the back of my neck. He ran his hand through my flaming hair and smiled. How'd you know I wouldn't burn you?
I didn't.
Chapter 44. Aaron's phone rang and ruined the moment, or perhaps it saved us. The call had turned him from relaxed to chewing railroad ties in a matter of seconds. I dressed and went inside to give him some privacy. Aaron came inside as I put away the last of the dishes.
Terrence Pierce has skipped town.
Are you sure? I'd hoped with him out of the city the threat lessened, but I knew it was wishful thinking.
Flight records show he boarded a plane to Vegas this afternoon.
I closed the cabinet and turned. Good riddance.
You still believe he's one of the shooters?
Yes, absolutely.
You told me once that the newly dead don't always get the details right.
That he'd paid attention made me smile. That's true. But Miss Mercier knew Terrence for years. She recognized him before he pulled the trigger.
We sent your sketch to the Vegas PD. We didn't have any luck with our facial recognition software on the video footage from the ice rink. The mayor called in a favor, and the feds are running the sketch and some prints through their systems. We'll find these two.
I hope so. Bryson joined us in the kitchen. His wet hair hung down the center of his back, soaking his t-shirt. He nodded to Aaron.
You ready to get your feet wet in tribal politics?
Tribal bullshit's more like it. I sighed and took a seat. Aaron grinned.
Hit me. It can't be worse than police politics. The council split down the middle. Buck on one side, and Macon on the other.
Bryson said. I sat back and searched his face. What do you mean, they split?
The vote to bind you by force was down the middle. What does that mean?
Aaron crossed his arms.
They think Tessa is too powerful. They want to bind her magic until she is better equipped to handle it.
He squeezed my hand.
I was able to convince Buck and several others to vote no.
It surprised me that he'd convinced Buck of anything. Did you tell them about Betty?
I told Buck in private. He agreed to keep it between us for the time being. We don't want her husband to demand we hand her over before we know who did this. Are Betty and Tessa safe here?
Aaron leaned against the cabinet and put his hand on my shoulder. Bryson looked between us and smiled.
I'll put Charlie's wards back in place. I lowered them when the tribe started coming to the medicine shop. That will keep most of the elders out. Macon may be able to attack from a distance.
Aaron sighed.
This is all beyond me.
I turned to him. No, it isn't. The firebird responds to you like she does with Bryson. As long as one of you are with me, we can beat him. Bryson interrupted.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. Macon may leave you alone until after the next vote. When is that?
Aaron massaged my shoulder.
December 23rd.
My hope swirled the bowl. That's less than a week from now. How are we going to prove Macon attacked Betty by then? Bryson smiled.
Buck gave me an old spell, and I happened to get a fistful of John Macon's hair. We have to wait until morning, but we'll know if it was him.
Aaron chuckled.
Other than the spells, it sounds a lot like police station politics.
Unlike the men, I saw nothing humorous in Bryson fighting. That slimy old man agreed to fight you?
No. He came at me as a wolf.
Aaron scratched his head.
How does a hawk fight a wolf? Who says I shifted?
He gave my thigh a playful slap. I shook my head, still not finding this funny. Besides her physical injuries, Betty has aged well beyond her years. Why would old man Matthews allow Macon to hurt his wife? Bryson's expression hardened.
They blamed you. They said the spell you worked backfired.
I rested my head on the table. I'd wondered if I caused the changes when I first laid eyes on her. Bryson said,
Tessa, your spell didn't hurt those women. Tanya Jones was at the tribal house. She's tainted with the same dark magic I felt on Betty. They're using this as a way to discredit you and punish their wives.
That's awful. I can't imagine someone I love purposely hurting me. I remembered my last 2 run-ins with Darlene and sighed. Maybe I wasn't any better. Aaron sat beside me.
It's an entirely different situation between you and Darlene.
How in the hell did you know what I was thinking? They laughed and pulled me from my chair. Aaron grinned like he knew the punchline, but didn't share. I looked between them, and for once didn't feel like they'd ganged up on me. When we weren't trying, the relationship eased into a yoga pants and t-shirt kind of comfortable. Bryson wrapped his arm around my shoulder.
We know how you think.
I poked his side. Keep telling yourselves that. Aaron rubbed the back of his neck.
I should get going. It's late.
Stay? Holding my breath, I glanced between them. The word hung in the air like a smoke ring.
I'm good with that,
Bryson said.
I could stay. I'm off tomorrow unless they call me in.
He shrugged. Good. We're decorating the Christmas tree before May has a fit. Everything is running late this year. I smiled, knowing that adding Aaron to the mix meant we could finish in half the time. Aaron asked,
Has she forgiven you for Thanksgiving?
Not exactly. Bryson shook me playfully and spoke with his lips against my temple.
Babe, you need to mend fences with Darlene.
She stopped by this morning. The fences are in the wood chipper. With everything hanging over my head, I had my choice of issues to worry over. I glanced between the men and bit my lower lip. Are we ready for bed? They both eyed me, but Bryson broke the silence.
We should talk about this first. Make sure we're on the same page. Tessa, I'm certain you have questions.
Between Bryson's arm around my shoulder and Aaron holding my hand, I'd settled into the idea of the 3 of us. Any discussion on the matter now would feel like grease in the tracks and threaten to derail us. What exactly did you mean when you said Aaron and I should explore?
I don't have a problem with the 2 of you getting physical.
He nodded to Aaron.
He and I talked about this while you were out after the accident. We're good with sharing if you are. In whatever way you're comfortable.
Aaron watched my reaction, as if questioning a suspect. Does that mean you each get alone time, or will it always be together? I turned to Bryson. We've been sharing a bed. Will that continue?
As long as you're comfortable with it, yes.
He nodded.
I don't have a problem with you staying with Aaron or him staying here with us when he isn't working like a madman.
The question I wanted to ask worried me. No matter how I worded it, it sounded prejudiced in my head. No, that's not the problem. I doubted either would be offended, but I wasn't sure how I would feel about their answer. Aaron ran his fingers over the back of my hand and wrist.
What's bothering you?
What about you 2? I motioned between them as if it would clarify my question. Aaron shrugged.
I'm open to either or both of you. I prefer women, but I'm not opposed to threesomes now and experimenting more later.
Bryson met my gaze.
We'll take things slow, talk about what worked and what didn't, and put our relationships first.
I can do that. I smiled, though doubt hovered on the edge of my conscience. Bryson leaned in and gave me a hell of a kiss. He pulled back and watched me through half-lidded eyes. I turned to Aaron, who wore the same hazy expression.
Agreed.
Aaron brushed his lips across mine twice before teasing my lips apart with his tongue as Bryson slid his hand down my side. I wanted this, wanted them, both of them. We'd slide down the long, oily road to hell in vinyl suits together. Chapter 45. I'd slept off and on, sandwiched between Bryson and Aaron. Every so often, Bryson or I had slipped out to check on Betty. Despite the less than peaceful night, I'd woken in the morning feeling energized. Bryson stretched his arms over his head and rolled to face me. His drowsy smile and messy hair added an innocent quality to his face.
Good morning.
Hi. I nuzzled against him as Aaron tossed his arm over my hip. Heaven. I'd tripped and fallen into heaven. I closed my eyes and hovered in the space between waking and sleeping. Bryson whispered,
We should do the identification spell and try to wake Betty.
I frowned. I don't want to get up yet.
We have a busy day.
He kissed my forehead and got out of bed. I rolled over and watched Aaron sleep. Why Mother Nature had given a man such thick, dark lashes astounded me. At rest, the angles of his face lessened and his lips softened. I wondered what we looked like to the rest of the world when we were together. Would anyone notice me, the short redhead, between two beautiful men? I eased out of bed and threw on a pair of sweats and a hoodie to stave off the morning chill. The aroma of fresh coffee made me love Bryson a little more as I wandered into the kitchen. I poured myself a cup and went into the little bedroom. Bryson turned and gave me a wink while mixing the ingredients for the spell.
Are you ready?
As I'll ever be. I moved to Betty and drew a cleansing breath, then another. The candles in the room flared to life as Bryson approached.
I'll work the spell. You keep an eye on her.
He coated his finger with the mixture and drew a plus sign on Betty's forehead. I put the back of my hand to my nose and set the coffee aside. Whatever he'd put in the poultice smelled like rotten vegetables. He pulled the blankets to her waist and drew a symbol on her belly before setting the mortar aside. Bryson opened an envelope and sprinkled a few hairs over her heart.
Bone for bone, blood for blood. Someone has given and she has received. Is his name John Macon?
He held his hands over her heart and repeated the words. The wolf hair moved down her body to the symbol on her belly. Bryson frowned and repeated the words a third time, but the hair didn't move.
It's not him.
It has to be. Maybe the poultice is spoiled? Is it supposed to smell like that? I stared at Betty's serene face and shook my head. What if I go to her house? I can try to read the mirrors. Bryson wiped the mess from her forehead.
No, you can't go near Matthews.
We could call her spirit forward. I couldn't let whoever did this get away with it. I'd never considered someone else could have attacked Betty. The thought made my stomach clench. Do it again.
Tessa, I felt the magic. The spell worked.
I grabbed his hand. The vote's in a couple of days.
You've changed your mind about giving up your magic?
The hopeful lift in his voice broke my heart. I don't know, but I don't want it to happen by force. I won't give them the satisfaction. He nodded, but avoided my eyes as he covered Betty and put away the supplies. I couldn't stand there and do nothing. We had to expose John Macon and make him pay. We need to get Dottie to testify to the council.
She's terrified of Macon. Do you think she can handle facing him and the elders?
Not since Charlie died. I frowned and glanced around the room. If he were here, she'd do it.
Don't.
I frowned and looked away. In the weeks following Charlie's death, I'd considered reaching out to his spirit often. The only reason I hadn't done it before now was I knew if he wanted to talk to me, he would come. Bryson stared, as if he had more to say on the topic of summoning my grandfather's ghost. I'm not calling Charlie when we can wake her and ask her who hurt her. I turned my attention to Betty and frowned. Bryson squeezed my shoulder.
What's wrong?
Shouldn't she have peed by now? She's been here 2 days.
I assumed you were taking care of her hygiene.
He slid his finger along the inside of her cheek.
She's not dehydrated.
Would she be?
Yes, given her injuries. What sort of spells did you cast over her? Anything having to do with preserving life or making her rest?
He checked her pulse again. I don't know. The words came to me and I said them. The need to step away from Betty overwhelmed me, but this time it had nothing to do with dark magic. Did I hurt her?
No. If anything, you may have saved her.
What do you mean?
Someone packed her full of spells to kill her and possibly hurt you. By putting her in stasis, you may have cut off the energy supply to the magic.
But she woke up choking.
That kind of magic is meant to lie dormant until it's time to do damage.
Like a bomb, I smirked. I need to look at the wounds on her back. He tucked her arms against her chest and log-rolled her to her side. I covered my mouth and took a step back. The lacerations on her back had healed into ugly red welts in a matter of days. If her body's in limbo, how'd she heal?
Your magic.
He traced a large red scar with his finger.
You're stronger than you think, Tessa.
I doubt that. That he believed I could pull off that level of healing gave me hope. However, he'd think differently if he'd seen me nearly fall apart when the women brought her here. Tonight's the full moon. If the attack turned her, will she shift while in stasis? The pride in his eyes told me he believed what he'd said about me.
Depends on the spell. I think we should wake her and allow what is going to happen to happen. I'd rather her shift with us to help her than alone next month.
Since I didn't know if the spell I'd used to heal her had put her under, or if dark magic caused her stasis, I wasn't sure how to go about waking her. Bryson had paid me a compliment not a minute earlier, a compliment I couldn't live up to. I swallowed my pride and sighed. I don't know how to wake her. Amusement lit his eyes.
You must have some idea.
I moved to her side and focused on the energy surrounding her. My energy. Would I sense her wolf if she has one? Bryson nodded, studying my movements as if he'd issue a grade when I finished. I closed my eyes and drew a breath. Along with air, I imagined myself inhaling my magic into my lungs. Exhaling, I refocused the energy and envisioned it as a net cast out to find any hint of animal in her blood. The third time I exhaled, I whispered, "Wake." Betty's eyes moved below her lids before they opened. She turned her head in my direction and wrinkled her brow. The aging effects of John's dark magic melted away, leaving her as nature intended, beautiful. How do you feel, Mrs. Matthews? I pressed my fingers to the inside of her wrist. Her pulse was strong and quickening. What am I doing here? She pushed herself up a few inches before sinking back. What happened? Bryson stepped forward.
You were attacked in your home. Tanya and your friends brought you here.
She shrank from him and tugged the blanket to her chin. Attacked? Bryson, would you give us a minute? I rested my hand on her arm. He nodded and left the room. You've been here 2 days. I did my best to heal you. I sat on the edge of the bed. Do you remember what happened? No. Why'd they bring me? Her words died on her tongue. She closed her eyes and pressed her lips into a thin line. Am I going to turn? I looked away to give myself a second to choose my words. How can I tell her she'll grow fur and a tail once a month? Betty made a sound in the back of her throat and stilled. Her face relaxed as she drew a deep breath. She exhaled in laughter, ear-piercing, hysterical laughter. Try to stay calm. Bryson is here. We'll get you through it. I took her hand. She continued to laugh until tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. Hallelujah! Ma'am? I pulled my magic to the surface, preparing to knock her out if necessary. Does my husband know? She sat upright. No, I didn't know who did this to you. I wanted to be sure you were safe. I'll be safe when I have a wolf. No one will hurt me again. My mental health training kicked in, though I didn't need a graduate degree to guess that she'd suffered from domestic abuse. The small amount of time I'd spent with her husband was enough. Did Mr. Matthews attack you? That'd be my guess, but I honestly don't remember anything after John. She'd said more than she'd intended. Her eyes widened and the color drained from her face. The last thing I remember is being with my lover. My heart stopped. John Macon? You can't tell anyone, please. It'll ruin me. She glanced around the room. Where are my clothes? I'll get you something to wear. I went to my dresser and pulled out a pair of hand-me-down pants and an oversized shirt. These should fit. Do you have a phone? I need to call Tanya. I debated the wisdom of her speaking to her friend, but I couldn't keep her locked up here. I handed her my phone. You may still be in danger. Please ask Tanya to keep quiet about this. Of course. She lifted her chin. I'll give you some privacy. I went into the living room and paced, considering my options. John Macon and Betty? What if she called him? She'd put all of us in danger. He couldn't be in love with her, not with the nasty spells he'd cast. Did she know what he'd done to her? Something prickled the back of my neck, filling me with dread. Dark magic? A spirit? Bryson? He came through the front door.
What happened? Is Betty all right?
She's getting dressed. Do you feel dark magic? Healing her, waking her, all of it came too easy. Experience told me not to trust it. Anyone powerful enough to cast the spells that plagued Betty wouldn't go down without a fight. A fight to the death if he found out I knew his secrets. Gavin? Gavin Partridge! Can you hear me?
What's wrong?
Bryson furrowed his brow.
I don't sense anything.
You're not going to believe this, but the ghost smelled the dark magic. I closed my eyes and focused. Gavin Partridge, I beg of you, come to me. Gavin appeared in the room.
For crying out loud. First, you can't wait to get rid of me, and now you pull me out of a poker game. What do you want, hell girl?
I'm sorry. It's important. Do you smell anything? He looked at Bryson, down him, and back up again.
Other than a fine piece of man candy.
Bryson strode across the room to my side. I turned to Gavin, pleading. Does it still smell like rot in here? He lifted his nose and sniffed.
No.
Oh, thank God. I sank to the sofa. He says it's clear. Bryson put his hands on my shoulders.
Does she remember who attacked her?
No, but she told me something worse. I relayed the details of my conversation with Betty while Gavin listened.
Wait a minute. That sweet old woman is sleeping with an evil magical wolfman?
Gavin's already bulging eyes threatened to burst out of their sockets.